One of the greatest biblical scholars of Jesus' day didn't get it. His name was Nicodemus. He was so smart and so well schooled that he had memorized huge sections of the Old Testament. But when he came to what I've just referred to, he just didn't get it. That's why he came to Jesus sort of inquiring about what's going on here. Because I know that God has to be with someone like you because you couldn't do all these things unless God was with him. And Jesus flat out told him why he could not see spiritual things. Here's Jesus' exact words. I tell you the truth, unless a man is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven. Now, Nicodemus wanted to get into a real dialogue. He said, how can that be? Surely you're not implying that an older man can re-enter his mother's womb and be born again. And so Jesus broke it down, made it as simple, just in one little liner. Jesus said to him, flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit gives birth to the Spirit. Now you would expect Nicodemus says, oh, now I get it. You're telling me that when you're born with fleshly bodies, we can see from a fleshly point of view. But in order to see spiritual things, we must have a spiritual rebirth. He didn't say that. He kept asking, I don't get it. Say it again. Say it again. And so Jesus just quit. And he explained, I've spoken to you of earthly things, and you don't believe. Then how will you believe if I speak to you of heavenly things? Then Jesus, out of his compassion for Nicodemus and the rest of us who are sort of slow on the uptake, he said, for God so loved the world, Nicodemus, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. You may not get that, Nicodemus, but that's the heart of all the other truths. You know, the person who has helped me the most in getting a handle on this, or at least a partial handle on it, is Simon Peter. Because Peter is sort of an easy read. He didn't have any formal education. He was not a biblical scholar. Oh, I mean, he could read and write and, you know, count money. But his education came from the water. His father was a professional fisherman. All of his best buddies were fishermen. He learned all that he learned in a major way, naturally and spiritually, from the water. Now, fishermen in the first century had two acquired traits that served them well when it came to learning about spiritual things. Fishermen were coachable and sensitive to the unpredictable. They were coachable. They wanted to know how to do things better. They wanted to know how to be better at fishing, cleaning fish, cooking fish, selling fish, making boats, painting boats, setting sails. They wanted to be the best they could be, and they were coachable in order to become. But also, they were sensitive to the unpredictable, because they never really knew exactly where all those schools of fish were going to be. And also, they didn't know when a storm would come up on that marvelous Lake Galilee. It looked like it'd be calm like today, but because of the nature around them with those little hills, a storm could come up in a matter of minutes and be serious and put boats in serious danger if they were sailing on the Lake of Galilee. You know, it was no coincidence that 4 of Jesus' 12 disciples were fishermen. And of those 4, 3 Jesus brought in on his inner circle so that they could see the unexpected, such as the transformation. Studying Peter's life as it evolves from being interested primarily in earthly things to becoming primarily interested in heavenly things is like observing a little caterpillar as it evolves into a butterfly. As you may know, the little caterpillar is very earthbound. And it's very destructive as it eats away the farmer's crops. But as a butterfly, it can soar into the sky and fly for hundreds and hundreds of miles as it pollinates bushes and flowers and plants, becoming a major factor in the propagation of life. You just can't help loving old tough and rugged Peter. He knew about Jesus before he decided to become a disciple. He'd heard him teach. He had seen him heal people. He even had one-on-one personal conversations with him. So that on that particular morning when Jesus was walking along the docks in the little teeny Capernaum town on the northern shore of the lake, it wasn't the first time that they were meeting. They were friends, Peter and Jesus, or at least they were acquaintances. Still, it was a major decision for Peter to decide to leave and follow Jesus. Because that meant he was leaving a lucrative commercial fishing business. It also meant that he was expecting his dad to carry on the business with employees rather than with a son. But he knew what he was doing and he never turned back. It wasn't easy being a special disciple of Jesus, but it was exciting. There never was a dull moment. Imagine being in Peter's home one time when there were so many people crowded in, probably in a room not as big as this, and dust began to come down. And as they look up, those old dried palm leaves are being torn away and making a hole big enough to let down a paralytic on a mat right in front of Jesus. But that wasn't the unexpected thing. The surprising thing was watch Jesus heal that paralytic so that he could stand up right there in the midst of them and hop around if he wanted to. Peter's observation of physical healings became a daily occurrence. The blind received their sight, and the deaf received their hearing. Lepers had their skin restored to perfect health. And those were unusual experiences for anyone to observe. You know, Peter must have discussed that over and over with his buddies. How in the world does he do this? Over and over again we see him doing these healing miracles. Peter even saw and experienced the feeding of 5,000 people with 2 measly fish and 5 loaves of bread. Now, I think what the rest of us sometimes forget in that little incident is we get caught up with the little boy or with the vastness of the crowd. But think what it's like to be one of those disciples and say, all right, now you divide them up into 12 major groups and then the smaller groups of 50 or 100, and then you feed them. And then Jesus spread that out into 12 different parts. So they had their little baskets, each of those disciples, no bigger than a Publix little basket. And off they went to feed their little portion, which is, what, 416? Suppose that was your assignment. Now you go feed your 416 with this measly amount of fish and bread. And so every time Peter put his hand in that basket to give somebody a reasonable evening meal, there was more in the basket for the next time. We don't understand these things. Sometimes I used to try to understand them on other natural ways. Like I know a little seed of corn dropped into the ground will produce a stalk of corn that will have many ears on it and hundreds of other little things. But suppose I dropped it into the ground, squished it in with my feet, and within a split second, the stalk comes up and there's 100 more little seeds. Then you turn around and do it again and another stalk pops up. It was even more astounding than that, in my opinion, because these weren't just living fish and living bread. These were cooked fish and cooked bread. I mean, these things are hard to comprehend.